everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am doing my mid-July reading wrap-up. I have 16 books to talk about in today's video that I read from July 1st to today when I'm filming this, which is July 16th. So without further ado, let's just get into it. So the first few books that I read at the very beginning of July were a part of the historical romance readathon that happened from June 28th to July 4th, I believe. So I'm just going to kind of briefly mention the books that I read for that readathon. If you want to know more of my in-depth thoughts as well as plot synopses and things like that, definitely go check out the reading vlog that I did for that readathon. That will of course be linked up in the cards above. So the first book that I want to bring up, this is a novella by Nicola Davidson. This is The Seduction of Viscount Vice, which is book 3 in her Fallen series. This is a series of erotic romance novellas that take place during the Regency era, and it centers around these 3 men who are best friends and they co-own a sex club together. This one is a second chance romance. There is quite a complicated plot going on, and I'm not going to get into that into this video, but I ended up giving this 5 stars. It might be my favorite novella of the 3, which is saying a lot because I know you guys have heard me rave and rave and rave about The Devil's Submission, which is book 2 in this series. It's just fantastic. I love second chance romances that are about one of the main characters betraying the other in the past and trying to make up for that and all those things. I'm going to shut up about this novella now, but it's just absolutely fantastic. Next, after that, I read Kidnapped by the Pirate by Kira Andrews. This is an indie published historical romance, as is The Seduction of Viscount Vice. But this, I gave this 5 stars as well. This is a fantastic pirate historical romance that is about 2 male characters. So a male pirate historical romance. It's absolutely everything. You can find the audiobook for this on Hoopla, and this the ebook is on Kindle Unlimited, by the way. And I can't wait to read more from Kira Andrews. As far as I know, this is her only historical romance, but I'm very curious to check out her contemporaries. Then let's see, next after that, I read A Lady by Midnight by Tessa Dare. This is book 3 in her Spindle Cove series, a series that has become very near and dear to my heart. I ended up giving this 4 stars. It's probably my least favorite of the series so far, and I had a feeling it was going to be going into it just because I know not a lot of people love this one, and I can understand why, although I still enjoyed it, still had a fun time. I just love the village of Spindle Cove, all the side characters, and all of that. And of course, like, Tessa Dare is just an icon, so I'm always going to enjoy what I read by her. And then next, I read another Tessa Dare, actually. This is Beauty and the Blacksmith. Woo, that is a shiny cover. This is a novella in the Spindle Cove series, and the events of this take place after the events of A Lady by Midnight. So it was perfect that I went into this one. Like I said, this is a novella. I think it's just about 150 pages. So like the title kind of says, we have Diana Highwood, who is our beauty. She's more of an aristocrat who has been living in Spindle Cove for the past year, and then she has been in love with Aaron the blacksmith for the past year that she's been living here. And the 2 of them confess their feelings for one another, and things go on from there. This had the perfect amount of angst and steam. Next up, we have If the Duke Demands by Anna Harrington. This was a book that I was encouraged to read from both Jess and Lisa. They both really enjoyed this book. I enjoyed it as well, but I gave it 4 stars, mainly because towards the end, the hero was kind of being trash to the heroine, and he didn't grovel nearly enough for that. So gave it 4 stars. Would have given it 5 stars though if the hero would not have been trash. Then the last book that I read for this readathon was The Footman and I by Valerie Bowman. I had such a fun time with this one. I gave this 4.5 stars. Was very close to being a 5-star read for me, but I'll briefly explain in a second why it wasn't 5 stars. But this one centers around, I believe, these 4 friends, and they decide to go in disguise as servants, essentially. So we have an Earl as our main character in this one. He decides to go undercover as a footman. So he decides to act as a footman at this house party that his best friend, who is a member of nobility, is having. He's essentially trying to find a wife, essentially. And so he's trying to see which of the women at this house party are actually genuine people and have good character and all of that. Because when he's tried to meet people as himself an Earl, he notices that women are just kissing up to him. They may not be as nice as they seem. I hope that makes sense. So this one was just really fun. Our heroine is 18, I believe, and she's kind of engaged to this old man that she definitely doesn't want to marry, and so she finds herself falling in love with this footman, and of course, he's not who he says he is, so of course the conflict towards the end is going to be about that, but I liked how all of that was handled. The only reason why I didn't give this 5 stars was because I wanted more steamy scenes. We only really got one steamy scene in this book, and I really liked these characters, so I wanted to see more of their steamy times. So next book that I read after the historical romance readathon was Bottle Rocket by Erin McClellan. This is, I want to say, book 3 in her Over the Holidays or So Over the Holidays series. These are all novellas that center around a particular holiday, as you can probably tell by the cover of this one. This one centers around the 4th of July, and so this one is a fantastic second chance romance. So we have Leo and Rosie, and they were in a very serious relationship when they were in high school, when they were 18. It was actually kind of a secret though, because Leo was very wealthy and Rosie was very poor, and they were worried that Leo's parents would be very judgmental of Rosie, so they just kept it a secret. And Leo ended up leaving home when they were 18 after they graduated high school, just because he's a very free-spirited person. He wanted to explore himself, what he wanted to do with his life and all of those things, and Rosie was definitely supportive of that, and so they broke up amicably, I guess you could say. And now it's been 13 years later. Rosie has been married and is now divorced at this point, and Leo comes back into her life basically for like a work-related thing, and so he's in town for a week, and they just cannot deny their chemistry. And something else that I loved about this book is that you can really feel the love between these two people from page 1, because in page 1 we're in the prologue when they're 18, when they're about to break up, and you can just feel this love and this chemistry between the two of them. It's just really beautiful to read about. And so now that they are reunited after 13 years, they realize that that spark is definitely still there. And essentially the two of them realize that they are compatible in more ways than one. Rosie actually ends up coming up with this like sexy checklist of things that she wants to do with Leo while he's in town. He obliges her. They also discover that Rosie's a dominant and Leo is a submissive, and there are some good steamy times going on in this novella for sure. We also have a more like guarded, kind of grumpy heroine-ish. People kind of perceive her as being cold, whereas Leo is definitely more open, more sunshiny, more likable on first glance, I guess you could say. And this was just so fun but so beautiful at the same time. I actually found myself tearing up numerous times because, like I said, you can just feel the love and the chemistry between these two people. But for most of this novella, there's no way that they could make a long-term relationship work, because Leo doesn't stay in one place ever at a time because of his work and because of who he is. He's just very, you know, just a very free-spirited person, and Rosie's the opposite of that. She wants that stability because she actually never had that when she was a kid. But they're happily ever after at the end. It's really beautiful, but it is non-traditional. I thought that I would throw that in there as well. It's not going to be a happily ever after that I think most people would go for, but it really works for this couple. Also, I would recommend checking out my Goodreads review, because I mention a lot of things about the sexy times that I don't want to talk about in this video because I'm worried that my monetization might get taken away or something. I don't know, but there's just lots of fun things happening. Also, want to briefly mention that both main characters are bisexual, and I think that's really, really cool. Next up, we have Worship by Jack Harbin. This is another novella. This one is definitely shorter than Bottle Rocket, because this one I think is just about like 70, 80 pages, something like that. And this one is a romance about Arden and Spencer, and they meet up again at their 10-year high school reunion, and we find out that Arden and Spencer were friends in high school, but they definitely weren't anything more than that. But Arden has been in love with Spencer for years and years and years. So they basically reunite at this high school reunion. So I ended up giving this 4 stars, maybe leaning a little bit more towards 3.5 stars, but I just said, we love a short, sweet, and sexy novella featuring a nerdy, worshipping hero who turns dominant in the bedroom, because their first sex scene literally happens at this high school reunion. They go to the locker room to clean up from an event or an incident that happens at the reunion, and yeah, steamy things start happening, and I'm not just talking about the shower. And that scene was probably my favorite part of the novella, and that happened like kind of right at the beginning. So I think that's why I'm leaning towards more of like a 3.5, is that like the rest of the novella didn't quite measure up to the beginning, in my opinion, but it was still a fun time. I really enjoy Jack Harbin's writing and all of that. All right, guys, we have to talk about this chunker right here, The Dragon Republic by R.F. Kuang. Book 2 in the Poppy War trilogy. My goodness. Let me just give you like a brief little synopsis of what this series centers around. This takes place in a fantasy world that feels very much like ancient China, and there's some interesting historical context going on because this series is actually based on wars that actually happened, and I'm gonna reference an article that I've been reading about this series. So book 1, The Poppy War, is referencing to the Opium Wars that took place between 1839 and 1842, as well as 1856 and 1860. This happened basically between China and the United Kingdom. Then the Poppy War is also based on the Second Sino-Japanese War, which took place between 1937 and 1945, which was between Japan and China. And then this book is based on the Chinese Civil War, which happened between 1945 and 1949. We are following our main character, Rin, at the very beginning of this whole series. She's kind of living in poverty in this little village, but she desperately wants to go to this military academy in their country, and so she studies really hard, gets into the academy. She eventually discovers that she's got very interesting magical abilities going on in the midst of all of this war that is happening. Book 2, my goodness, as much as I enjoyed book 1, book 2 really stepped things up in a huge way, in my opinion. I continue to marvel at R.F. Kuang's writing. The characters that she's created, they're all so multifaceted and complex and morally gray, and it is just so interesting to read about. Something else that is insane about this book is the amount of plot twists. Oh my goodness. Anytime that I felt like we were settling into some kind of routine with Rin and the other characters, some crazy event would happen and it would just upend absolutely everything, and I was just left shocked. Like, oh my goodness. I adored the way that this ended. I'm really intrigued to read the third and final book. I just think that this is a fantastic series. I love the ideas behind it. I love the world. It's just so cool, and this series is making me want to dive into fantasy again, because that's definitely a genre that I've been neglecting recently, but like, ugh. This is just so good. So next novella I want to bring up is Forbidden Fling by Kat Taylor. So Kat Taylor is the pen name of Katie Robert, who is my erotic romance queen at this point. She created a pen name that she could write just pure erotica under. And so this is book 1 in a new series by her, and this centers around our main character, Nevaeh. She's been dating this guy for quite a few years. I think they've just graduated college, and so they're celebrating their graduation at his father's beach house or villa or something like that. And she realizes over the course of this trip that he has not been a good boyfriend to her in lots of different ways. I'm not gonna get into all of that, but yeah, she essentially just starts this brief affair with her boyfriend's father, and things get very steamy from there. This novella is only like 50 pages and it's pure smut, very little plot. No happily ever after at the end, which I knew that going into it, but I still wanted that happily ever after, and so when it didn't happen, I was sad. But this was just such a fun time. I mean, Katie Robert knows how to write smut, right? So, I mean, I recommend checking it out for yourself. This one is on Kindle Unlimited, and I gave it 5 stars just because, like, it's Katie Robert, and I'm obsessed with everything she writes. Next up, we have another novella. This is The Risk by S.T. Abbey, which is book 1 in her Mind F series. I believe there's 5 novellas in this series total, and I already cannot wait to get to book 2 because the plot of this is just so good. The premise is just everything. So this is about Laura, I believe her name is. She is actually a serial killer. She has created this list of men that did something very traumatic to her about 10 years ago, I believe. And so she has been slowly but surely killing them off in pretty gruesome ways. I will say, as someone who like really can't deal with gore, I don't think that this novella gets like too gruesome, but I would just say definitely go into this a little hesitant, maybe with some caution, you know, definitely lots of trigger warnings going on for sure. So yeah, she's been slowly killing off these men. So at the very beginning of this novella, we see that she meets this guy, Logan, who turns out to be an FBI agent, and not just any FBI agent. He investigates serial killers, and he is investigating her case. Yeah, so this novella was just so good because I love Logan and Lara together so much. Like, they just have really great chemistry, some good steamy times, but obviously this is doomed from the start. Eventually shit's gonna hit the fan when she reveals to him who she is and what she's done and all of those things. But it's just like so addictive to read about these two people and about these murders that she's doing and about other serial killers that Logan is investigating and things like that. Like, it's just so fascinating. So cannot wait to read book 2. So glad that Jess from Peace Love Books recommended this so highly because I wouldn't have read this otherwise. Next book I want to discuss is Porn Star by Laurelyn Page and Sierra Simone. This is a book that has been on my radar well over a year at this point. Ever since I've read The Roommate by Rosie Danan, which is a romance that involves a porn star. I've just been very intrigued by romances that follow sex workers, essentially, I guess you could say. And this one's even more interesting because both the hero and the heroine are porn stars, though the hero, Logan, is definitely more established in his career. I believe he's like almost 30, whereas Debbie's like 21, so she's like more in like the earlier stages of her career. And this was just a lot more emotional and angsty than I expected it to be. I just like assumed this was gonna be like a light, fun read, and it's really not, but I really enjoyed it. Debbie and Logan were really great characters to follow, and I don't know, I really understood their actions and their motivations, even if I didn't always agree with them personally. I will say one thing that I didn't love about this book was something that I kind of knew was gonna happen going into it. So like, minor spoilers here, but it always makes me uneasy when a main character has to give up something huge like their career in order to be with the other main character. Like I said, I had a feeling that was gonna happen with this story. And I feel like the authors did their best to make that plot point work. I don't know, I would recommend reading this yourself if the subject matter interests you at all, because I also really liked how these two authors wrote about the adult film industry in general. I don't know, like the behind the scenes type things, maybe some shady things that are going on in the industry. All right, guys, next up we have A Lady of Rooksgrave Manor by Catherine Moon. I finally read this one. This has been on my Kindle, off of Kindle Unlimited for at least 2 months at this point, like since the book came out. And this, whew, this is quite a different book for me. I have never read a book quite like this because, first of all, it is a reverse harem. I don't think I've ever actually read one before, and if you don't know what a reverse harem is, that's when we have one heroine and multiple men that she has relationships with. And this one is even more interesting because it's paranormal, it's also historical, and wow. This book was just a lot, and I was so here for it. This is about our main character, Esther. We see at the beginning of the book that she is a maid in this household, but she's going to lose her job soon. So she meets this man, Dr. Underwood, who sees something very interesting in her. He can tell that she enjoys physical pleasure, I guess you could say, a lot. And so they meet, and steamy things start happening when, lo and behold, he transforms into somebody else. It's a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde situation, except it's Dr. Underwood and Mr. Tanner, where Mr. Tanner isn't quite human. He's kind of a huge monster, but she loves it. She's here for it. She's having a great time. And so Dr. Underwood introduces her to Rooksgrave Manor, which is this place where women live, and they entertain monsters, various different kinds of paranormal creatures. And so she shows up to this house, and she ends up having five lovers total. There's also a little bit of sword crossing, by the way, which we love to see. But yeah, one of them is a Sphinx shifter, one of them is a golem, a vampire, an invisible man, and Dr. Underwood and Mr. Tanner. So I guess you could say 6 men total, kind of, more like 5. But yeah, this is like 90% at least 90% sex scenes. So definitely be ready for that going into it. I knew that it was going to be that when I started reading it. And I do have to say that like each scene just feels very unique and it's its own thing, and you cannot get bored reading this book because there's just so many different characters and the world is really cool and interesting. This is the first book in a series and I'm so excited to read more into the series. Although I will say this took me 3 days to read. There is no audiobook for it. And that may not sound like a long time to you, but someone like me who typically reads a book within like a day or two, that is a lot. I do think this book was quite a bit long-winded at times. So definitely by the end, I was more than ready for this to be over, just because like the final conflict and just like the ending in general, I feel like just took a long time, and I don't think it needed to take that long. But it's still a really great reverse harem, like I said, with paranormal creatures, and it's also historical. I do recommend checking it out yourself. Just know that it may take you a little while to read. Alrighty, have to bring up the Jessa Kane novella that I've read so far this month, which is Caught by the Convicts. This is her newest release. It just came out, I want to say July 12th. And as soon as I read the synopsis, I immediately downloaded it off of Kindle Unlimited. I've been trying to read more of like her backlist and like work my way forward kind of chronologically, but I just couldn't resist when I read this, because this is actually an MMF romance, which I think she's only written like one of those before. So I was very intrigued by that. This plot, you guys, I mean, I'm always talking about how bonkers Jessa Kane novella plots are, but this one, it's on another level. We have our main character, Wendy, I believe her name is. So she goes to this prison to visit with her father, who has been there for quite some time, because she actually had kind of a traumatic childhood because of him. And so she's trying to just kind of like face her fears. But then a prison riot happens, and these two men that have been sharing a cell, like she's walking past all of these cells, their names are Clay and Ruger. So Clay immediately like takes her over his shoulder and runs to a secluded room away from the riot, and like immediately sexy times start happening, and it's bonkers. So then the riot's over, Ruger and Clay get taken back to their cell, she goes back home, and Clay and Ruger realize how obsessed they are with her, but they also realize that there are sparks between the two of them. And that's one of the things I loved about this novella, is the exploration of the romance between these two men, Clay and Ruger, who have been in prison together for a long time. They've also known each other for a really long time, like since they were teenagers. And I also loved how like Wendy brought these two men together. I thought that was really cool. So yeah, they basically escape prison and reunite with her, and things go on from there. It was a fun time as usual with Jessa Kane. This is definitely one of her darker romances that I've read. I gave this one 4 stars. It wasn't quite on the level of some other novellas that I've read by her, but I do love that she's writing MMF. I would love to see more of these poly romances from her, because I do think that she writes them well. I really loved the two male characters, Clay and Ruger. Wendy was just okay for me. Like, she was just an okay heroine, so I think that's mainly why I gave this 4 stars. All right, next up we have Cool for the Summer by Dahlia Adler. This is a book that I actually got an e-arc of off of NetGalley like months and months and months ago, so shame on me for waiting so long to read it, but it finally released and I had access to the audiobook, so that's why I finally read this. But this is a YA contemporary. First of all, I had a feeling I was going to love this book because of the title, which is paying homage to one of my favorite Demi Lovato songs ever, Cool for the Summer. And I really did enjoy this one. This one kind of takes inspiration from the movie Grease, the musical Grease, in that we have our main character Larissa. Over the summer, she has this really great fling with this girl Jasmine. They part ways, she starts school, realizes that this guy Chase that she has been crushing on for years is now reciprocating those feelings, and so she is just ecstatic about that. But then Jasmine, the girl that she had the fling with, shows up at her high school, and it turns out that she has moved to her town. And so what ensues is a messy love triangle. I wouldn't say that there's cheating in this book, because there definitely isn't, but there is this kind of situation where unfortunately Larissa doesn't treat Chase the best. Like, she's kind of emotionally unavailable to him because she's so hung up on Jasmine. So I would just make you aware of that before going into this book, but I love reading about teenage drama, so I was so here for this. Gave it 4 stars. I really loved also our main character Larissa exploring her sexuality. She's also someone that loves reading romance novels and is trying to write one herself. I thought that that was really cool. And this book is also pretty sex positive, which is great for YA, so I recommend it. Like I said, gave it 4 stars. And last but certainly not least, we have The Earl I Ruined by Scarlett Peckham. This is book 2 in her Secrets of Charlotte Street series, which is essentially a trilogy of historical romances that kind of center around BDSM and things like that. And so we have our main character Constance and our other main character Julian, who is an earl. The situation happens where Constance basically outs Julian as being into BDSM and things like that, and so his reputation is ruined, and so she decides that as an aristocrat, as a lady of nobility herself, that she will go into a fake engagement with him to make his reputation better, to try to make up for what she did to him. And so we find out that Julian has actually been in love with Constance for the past 8 years. He is very devastated by what she has done to him, and things go on from there. You know, like I said, there's this fake engagement going on. I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. I do think I enjoyed this one more than book 1 in this series, which was The Duke I Tempted. My main gripe actually was with Constance, our heroine. She frustrated me quite a bit throughout this book, although I will say she got better and better as the book went along, but she's definitely not my favorite heroine. And then also, like, for how much this book like constantly brings up how scandalous Julian is and how he's into BDSM and all these things, like, why did we only get one BDSM / roleplay scene between the hero and the heroine? Like, that just didn't make sense to me. There needed to be more steam in this book for like how it was set up, if that makes sense. So yeah, I was like a little bit disappointed with those couple of things, so that's why I gave it 3.5 stars. Enjoyed it still, and I'm really looking forward to reading the 3rd and final book, which I think is called The Lord I Left. I'm hoping to read that one within the next few days. All right, guys, that's going to be it for my mid-July wrap-up. I hope that you guys enjoyed. I would love it if you would leave a comment down below if you want to discuss any of the books that I brought up in this video, or if you want to give me recommendations or anything like that. I always love talking to you guys in the comments. So with that being said, I would love it if you would leave a like and subscribe, and I thank you so much in advance if you do, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!